Well, 13 billion years ago, there was a big explosion. Bang, bang. And the universe started to expand. And so, well, after 9 billion years, our own star, the sun, started to develop with its planets. And so then, 4 billion years ago, the first life was already on the planet, but it was just one cell life. And then 1 billion years ago, life developed into several cells, and soon the first plants were there. And then 250 million years ago, we had dinosaurs until 65 million years ago. And then 2 million years ago, the first humans started to develop. And then 10,000 years ago, we settled down for the first time. Before that, we never had villages, but 10,000 years ago, we developed that. And then 3,000 years before, Christ, we developed papyrus, and then 2,500 years before Christ, we developed the pyramids, and then 1,600 years before Christ, we had the ABC, and 750 years before Christ, we had Homerus, and that is a very, very interesting person who wrote the Iliad and the Odyssey. And the Iliad is really something very, very special. It's about the god of Greece, Zeus, who said that he didn't want to judge who was the most beautiful of three goddesses. So he said the human should do it, and so they let choose a human who was the most beautiful of three goddesses, and he didn't know, the human, that it was about three goddesses, and he chose Aphrodite. She promised him the most beautiful wife in the world if he chose her as the most beautiful of the three goddesses, and so she made him irresistible. And then he was invited into the court of a king, and that king, he had the most beautiful wife on the planet. But as Aphrodite had made the other guy irresistible, the wife of the king fell in love with the other guy, and he fell in love with her, so as promised by Aphrodite. And so they went home, but then, the king of who the wife was taken and run away, he was thinking it's not worth a fight. She ran away, so it's okay. But then the other goddesses, who was not chosen the most beautiful, Athena, she's the goddess of wisdom. She said to that king, "But your kingdom is worth nothing if you did not capture that kingdom of where your wife went to with that other guy." And so she said that to him, and then, he decided to attack the other city. And so he went to Troy to capture the city, but the walls were built by, gods, so they were invincible. But then they figured out that after 10 years, they would just do like they leave, but they left a wooden horse, and inside the horse were soldiers, but that you couldn't see. And so the Trojans, thinking all the other Greeks left, so they took in the horse in the city, and then they give a big party. But when they are all drunk, the horse, the soldiers come out, they open the gates of the city, And then the Greeks attack again and capture the city. So yeah, exciting story. It's about gods and yeah, and it's really it's like a good movie. So that is Homerus, and after Homerus, I have a philosopher, Parmenides, and Heraclitus, Socrates, Plato, Alexander the Great. That was a special guy. And Epicurus, and then Hannibal, and then Julius Caesar, and then Cicero. And then it goes on with Plotinus, and he invented that thing about heaven, that we should think about heaven and God. And so beyond the moon, it's not tangible anymore. Constantine, he built the Hagia Sophia, and he made a good Roman law codex of law. Constantine just moved the capital from Rome to Byzantium, which then became Constantine and now is Istanbul. And then Justinian, well, that was the guy of the Hagia Sophia, a huge basilica, the largest dome in the world for 1,000 years, until the Vatican with the St. Peter was built. And he also has a Codex Justinianus. He's the Eastern Roman Empire. And then we have Mohammed, who founded Islam. And we have Karl the Great, who made a European Christian empire. We have the story of Reinhard the Fox. We have the Black Death. And then in 1453, the fall of Constantinople, then the Medici come to power, Hieronymus Bosch paints fantastic things, Savonarola starts preaching against the Medici and the Pope, and then they build the St. Peter Basilica in Rome, and then Luther says the cost is too much. And then Machiavelli writes his book about, the aim justifies the means. You can kill people, whatever. And then Henry VIII in England, he wanted his divorce, didn't get it, decided to make his own church. And then Copernicus, he said, but the planets, they are turning in a different way. Then Catherine de' Medici, she became Queen of France. And then Peter is Bruegel. Bruegel painted in Flanders, painted some beautiful peasant countryside scenes with snow and farmers partying. It's a famous painter. And then Johannes Calvin, he's a reformer in France and did flee to Switzerland and inspired the Dutch. And then we have that terrible Bartholomeusnacht in Paris. And then we have, I think Queen Elizabeth the First, and then that the Protestants, and then in the Edit de Nantes, that the Protestants have rights in France. And then Marie de' Medici becomes Queen of France. And then Cervantes writes his Don Quixote. And then Galileo says the same as Copernicus. And then René Descartes, he's tired of everything, and he just says, there is no world of ideas, it's just me thinking. And then we have the Sun King, who built Versailles. And then Jean de La Fontaine, he makes all these beautiful fables. And then Willem of Oranje, he founded the Dutch nation and to become independent of Spain. And then we have Newton, and he said, that's how the planets turn around the sun, with these laws of nature. Cardinal Portocarrero influences the succession of the Spanish inheritance, making it go to a Bourbon king, and that France and Spain can never be united. Then the Tsar in Russia, he started to build his winter palace in St. Petersburg, the Hermitage. And then Linnaeus in the birthplace of IKEA, but he in the middle of Sweden starts thinking that, plants, they can be ordered into families of plants. And then we have Montesquieu, L'Esprit des Lois, David Hume, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart, Rousseau, who wrote Emile. We have Goethe with, the Sorrows of Young Werther. That's very romantic. Then Jefferson making the American Declaration of Independence. Immanuel Kant, who has very much critic, and then Hutton, the first geologist, Wordsworth, Napoleon. He made a civil code, and then Ludwig von Beethoven, beautiful music, Alexander von Humboldt, discovering nature, the Grimm brothers discovering all these Nordic fairy tales, and then there is something about chemistry, anorganic and organic chemistry. Then the first guy who discovers stars are suns and can prove it, a Prussian in 1828. 1823, Victor Hugo, he makes something about Lucrezia Borgia, a play. Alexis de Tocqueville, he writes about democracy in America in 35. Charles Dickens, he writes Oliver Twist. And then Karl Marx writes his Communist Manifest. And then in 48, Napoleon III comes to power. And then we have Abraham Lincoln, murdered later. And then we have the book of Max Havelaar, about Max Havelaar, a coffee trader in Indonesia, an immediate success in Holland. Victor Hugo, Les Miserables, abolishment of slavery, the Communist Commune in Paris in 1871. 1883, Nietzsche writes his books. Then in 1890, Koch and also Louis Pasteur, they discovered that bacteria are to blame for illness. And then 2 years later, Sherlock Holmes is invented because we need to find truth. And then Munich paints his scream. And Rutherford discovered something, and Ford makes his factories, and Kafka, he also writes things, and then Lenin makes his October Revolution. Clemenceau ends the war in favor of France. Hubble discovers many universes, galaxies, and then Stalin comes to power. Disney invents Mickey Mouse. Adolf Hitler comes to power. Chaplin makes the great dictator. Winston Churchill wants to free the world. Werner von Braun makes rockets and goes to space. Orwell writes Animal Farm. And then Mao comes to power. Che Guevara meets Fidel Castro and they go fight for Cuba. Fidel becomes the president of Cuba, and so on and so on.